Behind the Shades.
Thank you very much, Tareen. And thank you so much for having me on your show. I've been very, very excited. I was up super early today to be ready for it. My name is Stephanie Rowe, and I am a professional procurement, but I also have written a book, and it's my self-published memoir, Fiercely Me. And I created a website, so you can go to my website, www.mrsrowe.org, and buy an ebook now or a paperback copy, which will be available next January. Or you can find me and all of my wonderful adventures on TikTok, which is Stephanie Rowe, or Instagram, which is Mrs. Rowe Author, or you can find me on Facebook, which is Mrs. Rowe Author as well. So I'm also on Twitter, but I don't go on there that often. But yeah, they're my socials, and you can come and join and see all my wonderful photos and adventures and all of the things that are happening with the book, Fiercely Me, but also I'm doing a collaborative poetry book called The World in Our Words, which is coming out next year as well. So there's lots of fun things happening on my socials at the moment. But yeah, so I decided to write myself my memoir about a year and a half ago, because I had a goal in my whole life to write my memoir, because I've had such an interesting and quite crazy life. And I've always written. So I've written since I was very young. And so I had a lot of writing of like different things and different stories that I'd done. But I kind of was like, no, this is something that I want to do. I've had it on my wall. I'm writing a book, because I'm very big in manifestation and having like things on my wall. So on my wall, I'm writing a book for about 5 to 10 years. And I was like, I can't have this on my wall for this long and not actually be, accumulating all of the writing and doing something with it. So I just thought to myself, nope, it's time. It is now time. I feel like this is the perfect time for me to really sit down and write it. And so that's what I did.
For me, I thought about writing a book, but one of my concerns was that if I include my childhood where there was some difficulty in it, how would the readers, especially maybe the readers that I would know, like my friends, my family, acquaintances, how would they view that childhood through my eyes? Because to them, they may think, terrain, it wasn't really that bad, but to the person going through it, it was really that bad to me at that time. So, what was the inspiration for you to start writing about the things that you wrote about?
Yeah, so the inspiration for me personally, and it's kind of evolved now, has been I wanted to connect with others. So, like, a lot of my life, I'd felt kind of like left alone, and I was isolated for many reasons. And I just didn't have that kind of family support that a lot of people have. And I had to find that within my friend group. And so I just felt like if I wrote my story to share with others that you can experience loneliness and you can experience trauma and you can experience abuse and sexual abuse and you can experience all these really like horrible things, but you can also create a safe haven for yourself and a support network, and that you can actually survive it. And then through that survival, you can actually like flourish. And so that was my primary, was just like, I wanted someone, it didn't matter who it was, to pick up that book and to go, I am worthy enough to continue on this journey of life. I'm not alone. And my experience is not unique in that sense, that there's others. Because for me, I didn't realize that, and this is where it's kind of morphed now, that as the book is being released and people are reading it, I'm realizing that my story is not unique and that my story is our story, because everybody gets, like, it seems like everyone that reads it gets to connect with different parts. So it's like, I'm realizing no matter what country you're from, no matter what kind of experience, there's similarities in our all of our experiences, which people have just been really easily connecting to. And that brings me really like it brings me joy, because it means that, they get something out of it, because obviously like there's the kind of harder parts, but there's also like, this is what I've done to kind of become who I am and to become successful and to kind of build this really enjoyable, loving life. And people get to have that kind of see that vulnerability for what it is. Like, I'm extremely vulnerable, extremely honest, extremely raw. And it means that it almost allows the reader to be that raw and vulnerable with themselves and have that self-reflection. And everyone that has read it so far, the reviews have just been like, I want to love myself, like I want to love myself like she loves herself, because it inspires me to do that. And it's like, and that was the kind of purpose of it. So it's like, it's all of these kind of morphing from like reason why I wrote it, to like people actually resonating, and then, seeing why I wrote it, and seeing that it's connecting with people and that it's actually helping people in a really positive way is just like, it's beautiful. Like, I could not have asked for a better outcome. Honestly, I was just like, this is the reason why I wrote it, because I wanted people to have that outcome and
You
connect to it.
mentioned something that I want to definitely touch on when you said that to love yourself. And there's so many people who suffer from that
Mm,
because they try to get self-love externally, right? They'll
yeah.
say that I'm going to feel good about myself because Steph loves me in the way that I would want to be loved, right? And then when you kind of stop loving me that way, it's like, oh my God, what did I do wrong? Because I'm unable to love myself in a healthy way. How was the journey for you finding that type of love within so you can find it outside of yourself as well?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey, because like I'm in my 30s now, and I think we can all relate that when you're in your 20s and you've just come out of your teenage years, you're a little bit you're quite beaten by a few things, and schooling isn't generally that easy for people, and then you're kind of flung out into the world and you're kind of rolling around going, what am I doing? And so there's a lot of insecurities, and so like I had to go through all, my terrible toxic relationships and, all of that. I had to, I had to be honest with myself in my 20s and be like, you're in this relationship because you're lonely, because you don't want to be alone. You'd rather deal with all of this than just be lonely. And so I had to kind of be brutally honest with myself and get to a place where I was just like, I don't want to be in a relationship because of loneliness. It's like, it's not fair to me, it's not fair to the person. And so I had to kind of go through all of those stages, and I had to experience all of that to kind of get to the end of my 20s and go, I need drastic change. Like, I need drastic change. Like, this is because I had self-reflection literally in the mirror, and I was like, is this what you want for your life? Is this how you want to live your life? And I was like, no, this is like the polar opposite of how I want my life to be. And so what I would do is like, like I'm a bigger girl. I've been a bigger girl for the majority of my life. And a lot of people have put me down for it, like, because in their eyes, beauty is only within a small physique. So I could only be beautiful if I was small and petite, and that I had to do that and I had to fit that mold. And for me, that's really difficult, because it's like, well, I'm not small. Even if I lose weight, I've got big bones, I'm still got big arms, like I'm just not a small human being, I'm not a small personality, and I'm certainly physically not small. So I was just like, I had to overcome that. And so what was happening was that I was internally, getting up every day and looking at myself in the mirror and just saying like really disgusting things. Like, I mean, putrid things that I would never, ever, ever dream of saying to another human being. And because like we had full length mirrors at the time. And so I would look at myself. The first thing I would do is I would just tell myself really nasty things. And my day, like I was in this spiral of depression and I couldn't get out of it. And I didn't have the skills to get out of it. I didn't know what was going on because I wasn't conscious at this point. I was just like in a really dark place personally, but also within life. And I was feeling trapped and I didn't know what to do. And so one day I got up and I was doing the routine of just telling myself terrible things. And I went into the mirror, into the bathroom to clean my teeth. And as I cleaned my teeth, I looked at myself and I seen the light shine off of my eyes. And I took a moment and I stopped and I was like, oh my God, I have really beautiful brown eyes. And I thought, wow, that's so nice. Like it was so nice to see a positive thing about myself. And so I continue cleaning my teeth and I go back to just telling myself how, ugly I am and how unattractive I am and how like I'm lazy, all these negative self-talk, right? Go off to work. I'm standing at the train station and I feel a little lighter. And I'm like, oh, this is nice. It's nice to not feel so negative going to work, and feeling just like, oh my God, I hate work. I don't want to go. And this is a commute. And there's going to be 50 million humans on the freaking train. And someone's probably going to fart. And I'm going to be stuck in their fart smell. And it's just like, this whole transcribing of, the morning, which just didn't happen. And it was like, I get on the train and there's no one on the train for the first time in ages. And I just get to sit down and just go to work. And I had a great day. And so the next day I think to myself, well, I wonder if I implement what I did yesterday and I just look at myself when I'm cleaning my teeth and I just go, I notice one thing that I really like about myself. And so I did that. And I kept doing that for like weeks, days, months, years. And I still do that. And so what I was actually doing was I was changing my mind, my neural pathways, which had been ingrained to go down this way. And I was essentially building a little bridge in my brain to go down another way. So I was cutting off that cycle and I was then going on this little road over here. But this little road over here was actually giving myself praise and appreciation. And I was, learning that I could see myself and have bad days and have bad experiences, but I could also see my beauty, not only physically, but on the inside. And so it started this massive snowball. And then I've got a very inquisitive mind. And so I broke up with my boyfriend at the time because I was like, you're just toxic and I just do not want to be with you. And so I took that back. I was just like, I'm not going to tolerate this behavior anymore. I'm not going to allow to be in relationships like this. Because I was essentially getting my self-esteem back. I was getting my self-love back. And so I then started experimenting with life and I started going, okay, so in my mind, I'm perceiving that other women are looking at me in a certain way. And I thought to myself, well, in a negative way that they, were, casting judgment and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, why don't I just try something to see if that changes? And so I did. And I started complimenting women on how they looked or their shoes or their hair or whatever it was. And what I realized was that it was a perception in my mind. And as soon as I connected with another woman or a group of women in that kind of very gentle way, those walls would come down and there would be this kind of really authentic kind of connection. And it was really great. And so then I thought to myself, why don't I try this with men? And so I would then compliment men. And so it's been this kind of whole experimental kind of phase, which has been really great because I still do it today. And my husband's like, he's just like, you can just literally give anybody a compliment. I'm like, yeah, because everybody deserves a compliment. You know what I mean? So I kind of started it there. And then I really, really, really kind of ran home in my early 30s on loving myself because especially through COVID, because I was essentially single, alone, and in my unit going absolutely freaking mad, like mad. But it also gave me a lot of time to sit and contemplate what was going on for me. And so I realized that I would give out a lot of love and I would then get really empty on my tank and I would then have to, kind of stop all communication to kind of re-energize myself to then be able to go back into connecting with people. And so I just realized that I didn't want that anymore. I wanted to kind of stabilize that. And so I then started essentially psychologically reflecting all of the love that I gave out to people. I would bring it back to myself. And every time I would think, oh, I really miss this person, I'd be like, but why do you miss them? What is it about them? And do you actually need to give them your energy and your love? Or can you then redivert that to you and appreciate who you are and like find something that you really love about yourself to kind of soothe yourself? And so essentially what I was doing was I was giving myself self-care. And I was also giving myself the ability to kind of increase my self-esteem and understand what I wanted and what I didn't want across the board in all relationships, and how I was going to perceive myself within those relationships, but what my boundaries were going to be. And so there was a massive kind of transformation in my early 30s, which was coupled with some blocked memories that had come up and things like that. But I was just so adamant that I was like, I want to ensure that I and people go, you're really arrogant, and I'm like, and to anybody that gets called that knows that they're not arrogant, this is for you. People get very, very confronted with a human being that can actually genuinely have self-love for themselves and have self-esteem and have very clear boundaries. And so because they don't like that, because it's like it's got friction with who they are and their core beliefs, and they might be very, very insecure as a human being and have certain traits. When you come through and just like kind of carve through it like a melted butter, you essentially confront their existence. So I've been called many things, but I'm also like, I would take arrogance over not having self-love and self-respect for myself and self-esteem, because that
If I may jump in and add, one
yeah
thing I want to say in regards to what you were sharing, Steph, is I totally agree because for me in my 20s, I was just trying to survive. And by survive, I mean that I had no idea how to, in a healthy way, maintain certain relationships. To me, it was basically what I saw on TV, right? It was like, okay,
yeah
I knew Johnny John the streets since we were kids. So we had to be friends because our parents were friends. Him and I are
yeah
going to be friends. It's like destiny, right? It's us against the world, the neighborhood against every single person. And then one thing I found out as I grew up, as I became an adult, was that the world that I wanted to be a part of, the world that I wanted to help create, it was no longer the same world that these people want to be a part of. And
yeah
as I began to push forward and begin to understand, it was like my success, my growth, my healing was separating me from people that wanted to remain broken,
yep
toxic, unhealthy. And another thing that I did notice was that my relationship suffered because I didn't know what a healthy relationship was. My parents were living in a toxic relationship. They were separating, they were together, but they weren't together, right? They're in the same house,
yeah
but they
I
weren't
do.
together, right?
Yeah.
And I remember one time where I used to love, well, he's like the biggest villain now, right? But I used to love the Cosby Show, right?
Yeah.
Right. He was like the prototype, perfect black father, black family for everyone. Before all the allegations, people don't kill me, okay? So when I saw that, I would see families getting together at the dinner table. I would see parents communicating. I would see husband and wife talking to each other. How was your day? How was this?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I want that so
Yeah.
bad that the person that I was with at the time, I was okay, once we graduate from school, we're getting married. We're
Yeah.
broke. We don't have a house. We don't have a car, right? We're wearing this.
Yeah.
We only have 4 different outfits for a 5-day week, but we are going to make it work. And I learned so much about myself through all the failure that I went to. And I began to realize that words of affirmation became something that was really important to me because I didn't hear the words "I love you"
Mm,
growing up. I didn't hear the
mm,
words that you're going to be successful growing up. And because I was so disconnected from my family, quality time became something that was very important to me as well. That's how I was coping because I was yearning for these things. When
yeah.
you share your story, how you began to tell people, men and women, compliments, I hear someone that maybe didn't hear those kind words growing up, because as you mentioned, you're a bigger girl and people maybe look down on you because of that. And I always say bigger arms, bigger hugs,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh
Absolutely.
yeah.
Right. So for you, how did you, outside of giving the compliment, was there any other way that you were building up your self-esteem because some people began to view you as arrogant or something else?
Mm. Yeah, well, there has been a lot of different things that I've done, honestly. And one of them has become extremely self assured. So I know my gut will tell me exactly what I should be doing. And every time I go against it, like terrible things happen. And so for me, because like a lot of time, and like thank you for sharing what you just did, because it's what you experience is like a lot of people experience, and I just want to quickly touch on that because it's the same thing in Australia. Like people get out of school and they just get into relationships, then they get married, they have children, blah 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 blah, but they never have that that self reflection to kind of go, well, is what I'm doing okay, am I healthy, and so there is that separation. And for me, I experienced exactly what you did. There was that divide between I'm going to develop and go this way and the other's going that way, and it's a very difficult experience to, and that's where the kind of I really feel like the self-assurance came in, because I kind of was left to go, well, what are you going to do, Steph? Are you going to allow other people's perception and judgment of you, um, of how they see you create your life? Because that's what essentially was happening. It was like they were coupled together. It was like the perception of others, the judgment of others, what they thought of me was, essentially like a cotton sheet. It was completely entwined with one another, and I had to uncouple that. And so, how do you uncouple that within yourself to then become trusting of who you are and your intuition? And essentially, what happened was I got treated so badly that I was just like, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to continually go round in circles. I don't want the same outcome. I don't want to feel crap. And so I had to have a conversation and go, look, you need to become okay with yourself and with loneliness. And you need to find interests, and you need to find out what that means. And so I went on this massive exploration. And essentially what I did was I was like, okay, I'm going to, and I spent 3 to 6 months doing this. I kind of cut myself off from everybody. And then I sat down and I was like, okay, what do I want? Um, and I had to kind of go in every part of my life. I had to ask myself what I wanted. And it's very difficult for a lot of people, I've realized, to do this, to become so not self-accepting, I don't know what the word is, but to like be so self-assured of what you want as a human being and the direction that you want to go in. And so, like, how did I become like this person? How did I become have self-esteem? Well, obviously self-love was one, but understanding and respecting my wants and desires was another one, regardless of what everyone else wanted, right? And that's been a really hard lesson. And so what I mean by that second one is going, okay, so what do I want? Sitting down, asking myself that, but then going, do I want, if someone goes, hey, Seth, can you come to a lunch? And I'm like, my gut's going, I don't really want to because I really don't like your friends. And then you go anyway, and then you go to that lunch and you go there out of obligation because that's what you're supposed to do, and blah, 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 blah. And so you get there and you sit down and you're like, you know what? I wasn't supposed to be here. I didn't want to be here, and this isn't great. And you knew that, right? And so what I was doing was I wasn't putting myself first. I was putting the peer pressure of society and the conditioning before my wants and desires. And so what I had to do was before I would answer anybody, I would have to go, well, what do I actually want, Stephanie? Do I want to engage in this way? Do I want that in my life? And I would have to just turn around and go, look, I don't want to go and do that, because there was enough times that I'd gone and I'd done it out of obligation and it didn't serve me. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. So I had to kind of be really hard. And that was a really difficult thing for me to do, because I really love human beings and I love connection and I love being around people, but it was the wrong people. Yeah, it wasn't the right people for me. And so, yeah, I had to just go, I don't want to do this. And if they pushed it, go, look, this is, if you really want to know why, this is why. But I'm now getting to a place where I'm clearly able to communicate what my needs are and what makes me, feel happy in my life. So that self-assurance of backing myself is a huge thing. And also, like professionally, I have done a lot. Like I was, my self-esteem, like I don't know what your upbringing was like, but I didn't have parents. So my parents were MIA. I left home at 15. I had no guidance from them. And so I was, thrown into my 20s, having, going and trying to go to a psychologist to get that knowledge. But essentially, I then got into the workforce and I was doing really well. And so I got my self-esteem through my work as well. And so I then had to uncouple that. And so, like, for the last, like, probably 7 years, I've just been trying to uncouple all of this stuff, be objective. And that's what I mean. Like, it's a complex thing. How do you actually have self-love? It's in, like, all areas. It's just not one area of your life where you're like, oh, I've done affirmations. I've looked at myself. I can see the aesthetics. It's like, you then go into, what do I want my life to look like? How does that look? What will make me happy? And then you go, okay, my relationships in my life. Do I want to go and do this? No, I don't do it. Do you know what I mean? Then it's like professionally, I was doing really well. My self-esteem is through the roof. And then something would happen and it would deep dive, because my self-esteem was so connected to my professional work, right? So it shifted into that area. And I realized that I didn't want that anymore. I was just like, I don't want this to be so tumultuous. I would like some more stability. So I then had to kind of put boundaries within my work. And I had to be like, you need to become self-sufficient within yourself, within your self-esteem, without any external, without it being through something external, without, external friendships, external professional life, your wants and desires, like, you have to do this for you. So I was uncoupling all of these things. And internally, I was essentially psychologically going, yes. And I was, this isn't easy. I was devastated, because you have to, like, I was mourning it, because I'm like, it's so easy to get my self-esteem through my professional life, but it was like, it's also really detrimental to me as well, so,
I will actually, I want to piggyback off of that, because that's exactly how I felt when I began to climb the corporate ladder, right? And it was to the point where it's like I was feeling good.
yeah.
I was like, wow, look at me. Now in my position, I have like authority over people as a manager, right? And I look at some of the people who were being promoted around me, and it began to define them. Every time they'd walk around, right, they're like, oh, I'm manager terrain. And it's always, that's what they were leading with, right? And then once their income started to increase, they started to lead with their income. There was one girl, she was dating my friend. Well, I'm not friends with this person anymore, and I'm not friends with the girl, so I can tell the story. So, anyways, these two ex-friends, one a woman, one a man, they ended up dating, and they both worked in retail, right? So they worked, let's say, for example, your corner store. And they got together and they were dating. The woman ends up working at a bank, right? And she starts to climb. Now, back when they were working at the retail, earning $11 an hour, and they were taking the bus and they couldn't afford the car, all you can eat buffet was like date night. That was like, okay, let me get my fancy pants. Let me get my nice shirt, and let's go to all you can eat buffet. $29.99, okay, on a Friday night. Nice and cheap. And she started to work at the bank. Now she's getting exposed to all these high-end restaurants, $100, $200, right? And as the time went on, her boyfriend at the time was like, oh, okay, Friday, do you want to go to the all-you-can-eat buffet? And she was like, I'm too good for that, right? Because the job began to be who she was, right? It overtook her life. So from that point on, everything began to fall apart because the person she was becoming was the person she always wanted to be. Because
Yeah.
the person she was before, she hated that person, but at the time she couldn't change it. Now that she was
Mm.
able to change it through the actions of other people, right? Because now she's hanging around people who walk around in suits, who have dress pants, where you have to actually make a reservation to go to the
Mhm.
restaurant, right? You can't
Yeah.
just show up. So when you shared that, it immediately made me think of that, how some people get so tied to their job. Some people get
They
so
do.
tied to a title, right? It's
Yep.
like, and
Oh,
right.
yeah.
And to the women out there, don't hate me for this, but it's like when a lot of women become mothers, it's like they forget who they were before, right? All they know is that
Oh,
they're a
and I
mother.
think
All
there's
they
a
know
lot
is
of,
that they're a wife, right?
yeah, I think there's a lot of women that deeply identify with that, because and they struggle with it as well. They're like, how have I had all of this life? You know, like I've been however many years that they were without children, and then they have children. It's just like, you know, I think they go through a bit of a mourning process as well because it's like, well, my life is now about being a mother and a you know, a supporting wife or whatever the dynamics are. And so like, yeah, it can be very, very hard for women to go through that process. Today, I think it was, you know, because like we're talking about generations, and this is the other thing, like with my book, I just want to quickly touch on that, is like, so I touch on this in my book because my nana, she came over from the Second World War, and it was called a 10-pound pom. She was English and she came over to Australia. And at that time, she wasn't allowed to have a bank account. She wasn't allowed to have her money. She wasn't allowed to vote. You know, she had no independence from her husband. And we forget because, like, I am the second generation. No, yeah, I'm the second generation within my mum's side of the family who is Australian. Now, my mum, right, she had rights when she grew up, but in Australia, I don't talk about this because it's very controversial and a lot of people don't like me talking about it, but I will talk about it here. So my mum's generation, they had a thing where if you were not wedded, your child was stolen. Like essentially they were forced to take your child. So there was hospitals in Brisbane where if you were not married, you would go and give birth, and they would say to the mother, if you want to hold your baby, you have to sign this form. And that form was essentially giving that baby up, but they wouldn't tell the mother that. They'd sign it so they could hold the baby. And then they'd be like, we're now taking your baby. And so there's this whole generation. Yes, it's real. And so my auntie actually married her husband the day she gave birth because she realized that if she didn't, she would not have her child. And so, but that's also not spoken of in the family. So there's that, you know, so we've got my nan who's come here and she can't have her own independence. She can't go and get a job. She can't have any financial independence. Then you've got my mum and my auntie's generation where, you know, if they weren't wedded, their children were literally physically taken away from them. And then you've got me, right? And so I see myself, and this is, you know, one of the reasons why I am so brutally honest in this book, because I am like, I have a voice, I have the means, and I have the capabilities to not only advocate for others that don't have a voice, but also to go, you know what? I don't like what I see. And we have the ability to change it. We have the ability to change ourselves, but we also have the ability to change the world that we live in. And it is difficult and it is hard. And I do not deny that. But I would rather try than to not try, because to see women go through this, and for men, you know, because I'm, you know, like it wasn't their fault that this is society. You know, it's not like they came out and was like, you know, this is great, but it was like, you know, that was part of society, again, conditioning. But we're now going through a level of awakening where, you know, my generation, not everybody either, but like my generation, we are deciding that we do not like how conditioned it is. We do not like the way that relationships have been put onto us. We don't like you know, how this is all, you know, our expectation to do all of the housework as well as go and work. And, you know, like what toxic traits do we have? Like, what can we do to change this? And that, like, and some of it's really brutal. Like, I've had conversations in my friend group where we're like, yeah, I've totally casually racist because we grew up in a white country where one of the fundamental foundations of this country was white Australian policy. So if you can't even acknowledge that, then how are you going to actually deal with white being, having a racist point of view? And like it's so casual. And so like we've had to go through all of these different things, but again, it's a choice. We choose to either develop, we choose to either have that self-reflection, we choose to go, what, this isn't okay behavior. Yeah, that isn't okay. I don't like who I used to be, but I'm now going to do that work for myself and look forward. And it's across all areas of life. It's just not one facet. And so, in this book, I don't, touch on obviously the stolen babies thing.
I'm trying to figure out where all these babies went.
So they put them into orphanages, or they essentially like orphaned them out to families.
All right, so hold on. So I will take, I'm going to use it as an example. Okay, so I will take your child, put it in an orphanage for someone else to get it under the same rules that I've taken it from you.
Yep.
And that made sense to the government at that time.
What we're dealing with is like religion, honestly. Like, so you're dealing with a religious state essentially that's entwined. And they're going, well, you cannot, as a whatever religion it was, you cannot have a child out of wedlock because that's sin. That is sin. And we're going to do something about this. And we're going to show women and men what happens. And so there's actually an artist called Mia Dyson. She's an Australian artist, and she has a song called Jessie. And Jessie is literally about what I'm talking about. It is about a woman, and she kept sending Mia Dyson emails because she did a bit of an interview about this song. And she goes, for about 5 years, this woman just consistently sent me emails about writing a song about this topic. And she's talking about Jessie, who was her baby, who was taken away from her. And she's like, and the song it's really beautiful. I'm getting goosebumps. It's a very, very beautiful song. But essentially it's like, I never stopped loving you, and I never, ever stopped thinking of you. Like, it's like a love song to her son, which she wanted him to know. And so like there's all, and in Australia, nobody acknowledges any of this. A lot of people don't know about the 10-pound bombs, 10-pound bombs. No one knows about like what happened with the babies being stolen. Well, because there's also the Aboriginals that had their babies stolen as well. That was, but a lot of people knew about that, but they didn't necessarily know about, the women that had their babies taken out of wedlock. And so there's all of these things that, happen that I personally think is a complete travesty and should never, ever be repeated. And we can do better. Like, we have the opportunity and the knowledge and the resources to do better. And it is now time to do better. And so like, that's how I end my book. And I end it extremely powerfully. I end it in a way where it's like, no, you cannot misconstrue what I am saying. It is like, everybody deserves equality, and everybody deserves the right to live how they want to. And it's just like, and because I want to call it out, because someone has to be like, this isn't okay anymore. Like, yes, I've had I've had a lot of things happen to me, which have not been fabulous. But I also can reflect on that and go, I don't want this anymore. Like, I don't want anyone behind me, any generations behind me, not another single soul to ever experience this. But I also understand that it's fundamentally that we have that choice. We have that choice to develop. We have that choice to change. We have that choice to use our voice how we want to.
Yeah, I'll share a story here in Canada where I'm from. Last year, we're finding bodies of babies from Aboriginal that were taken and put into these schools for conditioning, for lack of a better word, so they can assimilate assimilate to whatever these people wanted them to assimilate into. And one thing that has always bothered me about things like this when they come to light is that as a person of my complexion, of my background, things of that nature, it's not many cultures have parts of their history that as a group they're not proud of, right? But instead of shying away from it, educate the people. Say that, in 1920, this happened.
Yep.
we notice it as a dark time, but look how far we've progressed from it, right? But there's
Mhm.
some people that they'll acknowledge it happened, then they would say, "Don't ever bring it up because we don't want to talk about it." Whereas when we found these children's bodies decaying in these schools, this was just last year. This wasn't 20 years ago. This wasn't 100 years ago. This wasn't 200 years ago. And one point that I like to make is that as a species, when we think about it, and when we consider how old the planet is and how old our modern civilization is, we're still in our infancy. We're still in a way
100%.
to learn, right?
100%. But we're also in an infancy in how we understand the mind and the body. And that is something that, like, unless as a race, right? Because we have the intelligence. That's the thing. We have the consciousness and the intelligence to actually understand about how the brain works, how the body works. But we haven't got there. We're very, very infant. And so, like, it's almost like I call it band-aids. Like, oh, well, we just need to, just go and see a psychologist. And it's just like, but you don't understand. Like, we aren't there yet. Like, yeah, okay, it'll help with certain skill sets, but we don't actually understand how the brain works. We don't understand how some of the body parts work. We don't understand energetically. Like, we have not gotten down to that exploration. We haven't gotten to points where we understand why people do certain things. Like, there has been, no scientific evidence in many areas, and the stuff that does exist is very limited. So not only are we immature as a humanity and as a race, but we're also immature within our understanding of the human body as well. When we have the capability and we have the resources to actually understand and collaborate across borders, because there are amazing minds. And I say this, I'm like, imagine if we lived in a world where, like, poverty wasn't a thing in, like, Africa, in India, in Asia. Imagine in Mexico. Imagine if we removed that just for a second, imagine a world where those constraints didn't exist, and you gave education to everybody, and you said to a person, like, in India, in Africa, in Asia, in Mexico, what do you want to study? And you gave them the knowledge and understanding of the basic fundamentals of what they wanted to study. Imagine the minds that would come out of these countries if they had the opportunity to actually engage in what drove them. Imagine where we would be as a race if we remove the limitations of poverty and financial constraints, and we gave opportunities to people to educate themselves. Like, it would be phenomenal. We would have no idea, technologically, medical, how we actually build, like, some of the things that I see from teenagers in Africa of their inventions of how they deal with electricity, how they deal with, turning tires into bricks for, like, they use their resources, I find it so amazing, but so fascinating. It's just like, we have the capabilities as a race to do way more than what we're doing, but we're not doing it. And that's essentially what I'm saying, is like, we and what you're talking about is absolutely disgusting. Like, and it shouldn't happen. Like, this is like last year. It just shouldn't happen. And we should be better than this. And I think that we definitely can be as a race internationally. I feel like we can definitely do a lot more than what we're doing.
As we look towards the future, what are maybe some of the ways that you believe that we can do better on an individual level that will help us to do better as the larger group in the world?
Yeah. So I think, like, because we've touched on a lot of things today, Terrain. So I think that honestly, the first building blocks of this is to kind of, because there's a lot of people, and and I think we're talking about. I'll kind of touch on the professionally as well, because what I tend to see, because, like, I've worked in a lot of different companies, and I've dealt with people from CEOs, managing directors, board members, all the way down to operational people. And I generally see that the people that earn the most money are not the most healthiest human beings. And then that kind of castrates down into the business. And it's illogical how they run it. And I think to myself, imagine if, like, as a a society, we were able to look at ourselves in the mirror and be strong enough to have self-reflection and to do self-development and do the hard things to actually work on ourselves in a really specific way. Imagine then, going back into the workplace and having healthy conversations, like people having more self-esteem, meaning that they're not going to be nasty and toxic and, horrible. But it almost cultivates these just really terrible environments. And I know why, because they haven't done any self-development, they haven't done any work, they haven't taken any ownership of their own behaviors. And I think personally that's what needs to happen is that a lot of people need to be honest with themselves and go, what, I can do better. And I have a very close friend, and she's very high up in management. And she's wonderful. I really like her. She's a wonderful human being. She's my soul sister. She's a very, very close friend. But she literally called me one day and she goes, "You need to come," because she lives down south. She lives in Victoria and Melbourne. She goes, "I need you to come down." And I said, "Yep, I'll be down tomorrow." So I hopped on an airplane. I flew down to her. And she said she had this moment of realization. She's like, "These people are really horrible and they're very toxic." And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "And I have been doing the same thing for years now." And I said, "Yes, you have been." And she goes, "And I feel really horrible about it." And I said, "You should. And you should use this and this feeling that you have and your experience that you're going through to actually change and to have self-development and self-reflection." I'm not a friend who's going to sit there and go, "Oh, darling, no, you're okay. It's been okay that you've been participating in toxic, social interaction for years in your workplace." And no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be like, "Yeah, you have been and you have participated, and you now have an opportunity to change and demonstrate as a leader within that business how to actually effectively manage." And you can deflect all of the other managers and all of their toxic traits, and you can demonstrate within your teams how you can become a leader effectively, but not have toxic traits, not isolate people, not make them feel like crap, like you can do that. And she did. And she had to have, a few months off, and she had to do some very deep, self-reflection, and she had to be honest with herself, and she had to take personal responsibility for her previous actions. But then she had to then go and do something about it, because there's an action part there. It's just not about identifying something and going, "Oh, well, I'm fine because I understand I'm a bit of a shithead." It's just like, no, you now need to change that behavior. You need to put that into action. And so she did. And our relationship has become stronger and deeper because, she has a deep found respect for me, as I have a deep found respect for her. And she knows that we will call each other out, because that's what I expect from my friendships. And so, and I'm using this as an example because I think that there's a lot of people that tend to shy away from this. And I want to really kind of go, everybody has these experiences. Not everybody, but a lot of people do have these experiences, but you're not hopeless. You have got the ability to change. And I have another friend that messaged me last week and said, "My workplace is really toxic. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with it, Steph? I really need you to help me." And so I said, "Okay, so you need to change the way that you go into work, And it's sad that we are at a point where we need to psychologically change who we are to go in and earn a crud so that we can survive financially." And I think that's the saddest part of this whole thing. And that's what I said to her. I'm like, the fact that we need to understand that people are going to be really mean to us. They're going to have really toxic traits and behaviors. They're not going to stop. Management aren't going to stop it because they thrive in this crap. And they want this. They want people divided. They don't want people, they propagate it. They really love that. And so when people like me and my friends walk in and we just go, "This is illogical and it doesn't work," we become the target because we want to change, And so if we go into those environments, we need to protect ourselves emotionally and, professionally as well. And so there's all the, essentially I say, well, we need to be a duck and we need to let the water just roll on down, baby, because they are insecure and they are nasty and they really probably don't like themselves. They don't like their life and they don't like what they've created. And that's a reflection of their behavior within the workplace. But guess what? We actually have love for ourselves and we have love for the people around us, which means that we're cultivating a different culture and we get to focus our energy on that exterior. And I said, just find one person that you connect with that you can trust and just don't worry about the rest of them. And so there's all these techniques that I am using with people at the moment because, we need to earn money. We have to earn money to live, but we also don't want to subject ourselves to this toxic work environment. And so I think that there's like all of this is entwined, and I know it's hard and it's complex, and I talk a lot, but it's because it's all entwined. Everything is entwined with one another, and it's really about until we have a huge change of consciousness, and the world goes, okay, it's time to now change the way that we're operating, and they have the self-reflection to go, I need to change these traits, and I'm going to action this. I'm going to put it into action, and I'm going to see how I go, and I'm going to ensure that I maintain it. Like, I don't think that we're going to see much change, but I do hope, and I do see it, and I see it cultivating a lot more than I have previously, that people are taking that, that step themselves and going. And when that happens, people reach out to me, and that's great. Like, people go, Steph, I need help. How did you do it? I don't want it. I don't want this to be my life anymore. I want, they own it, and they go, how do I help? And I go, okay, this is what we're going to do. And so I think that's really the only guidance at the moment on a personal level that I can suggest.
One thing that I
Yeah.
would suggest is to piggyback off of that is the most destructive and toxic relationship you'll ever have is at work. Because when you
Yeah.
think about it, your boss or your coworker or whomever can tell you things that you would not accept from your husband, your wife, your kids, your friends, your family, and you'll continue to live in it and allow it simply because there's a monetary gain
Yeah.
to it.